The morning in New Chicago was deceptively calm. A crisp, cold breeze swept across the streets, carrying the faint scent of fresh coffee and the distant hum of the city's daily bustle. But something was different today. The sky, usually clear and vibrant with a pale blue hue, had taken on a sickly green tint. An ominous crackling sound rippled through the air, like static electricity waiting to discharge. Captain Aria Drake stood on the rooftop of a skyscraper, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her dark hair, cut short for practicality, swayed in the wind as she clenched her fists, her mind racing with anticipation. She'd seen this before, in war zones and on distant planets, but never like this. The city was on the edge. She could feel it in her bones. "Captain, we've got movement." Massive energy signatures coming in hot, the voice of Lieutenant Cass, her communications officer, crackled in her earpiece. Aria's gaze shifted to the skyline. Her sharp, blue eyes narrowed, catching the first flickers of the enormous ships as they appeared, emerging from the cloud cover like monstrous shadows. Each ship, gleaming black with jagged edges, was impossibly large, too large for even the most advanced human weapons to handle. "Get me a read on them." "Weapons? Shields?" Aria barked into her comms. Her voice, usually calm and measured, held a touch of urgency. Cass's voice came through, crackling with static. "They're beyond anything we've ever encountered. Our sensors can barely register their mass. Shields are adapting in real time. Whatever they've got, it's not like anything we've seen." Aria turned from the edge of the roof and made her way to the rooftop access door, her boots echoing against the metal floors. The air was thick with tension as she descended quickly to the operations room below. Her mind raced. The ships had already broken through Earth's outer defenses, and it was clear the invaders weren't interested in negotiations. As she entered the command center, the room fell silent. The wall screens flickered with images of the alien vessels hanging in the atmosphere, blocking out the sun. Each ship was a massive dark silhouette, with strange sigils glowing faintly along their hulls. "Status?" Aria's voice cut through the silence, her eyes sharp as they swept across the team. Commander Blake, the man in charge of Earth's military fleet, stood at the front, fists clenched. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, the dark bags under his eyes a testament to the stress they'd all been under since the first signs of the alien approach. "They're here. And they're not asking for permission. Do we know who they are?" Aria asked, her voice controlled, though her gut told her this wasn't going to be a standard diplomatic mission. Blake glanced at the monitor, his jaw tightening. "Star Collective. They've been known to wage brutal campaigns across the galaxy. Their history is one of domination. Every species they've encountered has either submitted or been destroyed. And now they're here, demanding our surrender." "Surrender?" Aria muttered under her breath. "Not going to happen." Blake turned to her, meeting her gaze with a mix of desperation and determination. "We don't have the resources to repel them, Aria. Not with the fleet spread thin across the sector. I need you to lead the defense. We can buy time, but only if we make them understand what they're dealing with." Aria nodded, already formulating a plan. Time wasn't something they had in abundance, but she knew the Star. Known for their brutal combat tactics and technological superiority, they were nothing like the opponents humanity had fought before. Their approach was calculated, efficient, and completely devoid of mercy. The silence in the room was broken by the harsh beep of the emergency alarm, signaling the breach of Earth's outer defense grid. Aria didn't flinch. She had known this moment would come. Humanity had made too many enemies in their rise to power. "Everyone, move." "Now," she commanded. In the chaos that followed, Aria made her way to the war room, where the most critical decisions would be made. The hum of servers and the distant clang of machinery filled the air. She stood before the holographic display, her fingers dancing over the console to pull up the strategic maps. "Lieutenant Cass, get me a direct line to the fleet command," Aria said, her mind already in motion. Cass's voice came through. "Line secured, Captain. They're waiting for orders." Aria's eyes flicked over the map, which showed the star fleet closing in fast. Prepare for an emergency counterstrike. I want all fighter squads in the air, but do not engage until I give the order. We need to make them think we're retreating, buy us some time. Understood, Cass replied. Aria's heart pounded as she looked at the fleet's trajectory. They were coming in hot, not just to invade, but to overwhelm. And she had to make them believe Earth wasn't worth the trouble. It was a risky gamble, but it was the only card they had left to play. Commander Blake, I need you to rally the ground forces. I want every available soldier to fortify the perimeter of New Chicago. Civilians need to be evacuated within the next hour. We hold the city at all costs. Blake nodded grimly, already issuing orders into his comms. We'll hold, Captain. Just make sure those damn ships don't hit us with their first strike. Aria turned away from the map, her mind racing with contingency plans. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. They needed an edge, something the star didn't expect. The hum of engines filled the air as the first wave of human fighters, sleek and agile, shot past the windows of the command center. Aria stood still, watching the black silhouettes of the enemy ships grow larger on the horizon. Aria, Blake called, his voice low. We're outgunned. Outclassed. If we can't make them see that this is a fight they won't win, we're done. Aria's lips curled into a faint, determined smile. I don't plan on losing. Not today. She walked to the front of the room, eyes locked on the massive ships above. She didn't need a grand speech to rally her forces, just her quiet, unwavering resolve. Humans had been underestimated before. And this time, it would cost the star. Let them come, she muttered under her breath. We'll show them what happens when they try to take Earth. With that, she turned toward the exit, ready to lead the fight for humanity's survival. This chapter sets the stage for the coming conflict, introducing the major players, the threat posed by the star, and Aria's calm but determined leadership in the face of an impossible situation. The tension is palpable, and the sense of urgency is woven throughout the narrative, keeping the reader on edge as the stakes rise. The air was thick with tension as Aria Drake watched the chaos unfold. From the command center of Earth's fleet, the vast expanse of space stretched out like a dark ocean. The star warships now loomed overhead, their massive silhouettes blotting out the sun. On Earth, the ground trembled as the first wave of their assault began. The city of New Chicago, once a symbol of human progress, now felt like a target. Captain, we're receiving incoming fire. Lieutenant Cass's voice rang out from the comms console. They're launching energy blasts, something we've never encountered before. It's as if their weapons adapt to our defenses the moment we engage them. Aria's fingers tightened around the edge of the table, her knuckles white. The first volley of energy blasts hit Earth's atmosphere, sending shockwaves that rattled the command center. The defense grid flickered, struggling to compensate for the alien technology. Deploy all countermeasures, she snapped, voice steady, even as the weight of the situation bore down on her. All fighter squads are in the air, Captain. We're holding at full strength, Cass reported, her voice laced with a mixture of urgency and determination. Good. I want the first wave to make their move now. Hit them hard, but do not engage directly. They need to think we're retreating. Aria's plan was simple, outsmart the star by playing to their arrogance. She knew that the collective's commander, Zar-Tal'ik, was not one for subtlety. If humanity appeared to falter, he would move in for the kill. And that would be their opening. As the fleet began to mobilize, Aria turned her attention to the sky, watching the first human fighters split into their designated attack formations. These were Earth's most advanced machines, sleek, agile, designed for hit-and-run tactics. Against the star behemoths, they would be like gnats to a sleeping giant. But if they could keep the aliens distracted, they might just have a chance. In the distance, explosions bloomed in the sky as fighter jets engaged the outer perimeter of the star fleet. The fight was on, and the odds were stacked overwhelmingly against them. Ground forces reporting in, Commander Blake's voice came through the comms, grim and heavy. We've got civilian evacuations underway, but the streets are already full of enemy soldiers. They're pushing through at an alarming rate. We need more time. Aria's jaw clenched. Earth's military forces were spread thin, but they had the one advantage that Zar-Tal'ik and the Star didn't expect: the human spirit. Humans fought differently. They fought not for conquest, but for survival, for their homes. That kind of desperation could outlast even the strongest foe. Keep pushing them back, Blake. We'll buy you as much time as we can, Aria replied. She glanced at the digital map, where dots representing human and alien forces blinked, constantly shifting in the chaos. The Star might have the numbers, but humans had something more: the will to fight. Back in the field, the fighters danced in the sky like swarming bees, striking at the Star's outer defenses. The alien warships retaliated with unrelenting force, their energy weapons carving through the air like molten lightning. One of the human fighters exploded in a brilliant flash, vaporizing in an instant. "Damn it," Aria muttered under her breath, watching the carnage unfold. There was no room for hesitation in war, but seeing her comrades die made her stomach churn. She had to keep her focus. The plan had to work. "Aria," Cass said, breaking through her thoughts. "We've got a transmission from Zar-Tal'ik. He's demanding a ceasefire. Wants to speak with you directly." Aria's pulse quickened. Zar-Tal'ik. The leader of the Star Collective. Arrogant, calculating, and brutal. It was exactly what she expected. They were probably hoping to force a quick surrender. "Patch it through," Aria ordered, walking toward the communication console. The hologram flickered to life, and there, standing tall and imposing, was Zar-Tal'ik. His reptilian features were sharp, his eyes gleaming with a cold, unnerving intelligence. His voice, when it came, was a low, commanding growl. "Captain Aria Drake," he began, his tone dripping with disdain. "I've seen enough of your pathetic resistance. You and your people have no place in the galaxy. You will surrender now, or I will ensure that the destruction of your world will be swift." Aria's hands balled into fists. "I'm afraid you've misunderstood, Commander. You're not here to conquer us. You're here to learn that humanity is not so easily defeated. We will fight you with everything we have, and you will not find Earth an easy prize." Zar-Tal'ik chuckled, the sound grating on her nerves. "Your bravado is amusing. But you will see, eventually, that resistance is futile. I will break your will, Captain. I will break you." The hologram flickered as Zar-Tal'ik's image disappeared. Aria stood still, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy blanket. But she wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. "Lieutenant Cass, status on those countermeasures?" Aria asked, voice steady. Cass's voice crackled back over the comms. "We've deployed everything we can, Captain, but the enemy's shields are adapting faster than we anticipated. We're not gaining any ground." Aria glanced at the map. The Star were making their move, pushing deeper into Earth's atmosphere. A sense of urgency surged through her, and she knew they had to act fast. They couldn't let the enemy close the gap. "Activate Phase 2, Aria said, her voice low and determined. "Prepare to engage in a full-scale offensive. I'll take command of the ground forces. Blake, give me a status report on the civilian evacuation." Blake's voice was strained. "We're moving as quickly as we can, Captain, but the enemy's forces are overwhelming us. The eastern sector's been breached." "Not good enough," Aria snapped. "We're running out of time." She turned to her team. "We make our stand here. We'll buy as much time as possible for the civilians, but we're not backing down. This is our world, and we will not give it up without a fight." As the plan shifted into motion, the battle between the Star and humanity intensified. The streets of New Chicago became a war zone, with both sides clashing in brutal combat. Explosions rocked the skyline as fighters and warships rained down destruction, while ground forces engaged in desperate firefights. In the heart of the chaos, Aria led her team into the fray, determined to do whatever it took to protect her people. Zar-Tal'ik's forces were formidable, but humanity had something they didn't: a fierce will to survive. Aria's resolve never wavered. The battle had only just begun, and though the odds were overwhelming, she knew one thing for sure. They were far from finished. The air was thick with tension, and every heartbeat seemed to reverberate in Aria's chest. Below, the city of New Chicago was a wasteland of shattered glass, torn metal, and smoke. The rumbling of artillery fire echoed in the distance as Earth's remaining defenders rallied to their last stronghold. Aria stood in the command vehicle, scanning the battlefield from the massive screen in front of her. The war wasn't going in their favor. The Star were relentless, their forces nearly overwhelming, and every second spent on the defensive brought Earth closer to extinction. "Captain," Blake's voice crackled over the comms. "We're running out of time. The perimeter is close to breaking, and we've just lost contact with the western sector." Aria's fingers tightened on the controls, her gaze locked on the map. "Hold the line," she said firmly. "We can't let them break through." "Not yet." The plan was simple: buy time. Time for humanity's hidden weapon, time for reinforcements, and time to prove to the Star that Earth wasn't an easy prize. Aria had known the risks when she activated Elysium earlier in the day, and now, she could only hope it would be enough. But hope, as she had learned in the last few weeks, wasn't something she could rely on. The rumbling outside intensified as a squadron of Star warships soared overhead. Their ships were massive, almost alive with their deadly energy fields, the glowing lights of their weapon systems flashing like harbingers of doom. These were the things Earth had never fought before, an alien force capable of nearly anything. "We need to pull back to the final stronghold," Blake suggested, his voice strained with desperation. "We've lost too much ground." Aria shook her head. "No. We make our stand here. If we retreat, we lose everything." Blake hesitated, and for a moment, the tension in the vehicle was palpable. Aria could hear him breathe, could hear the quiet disbelief in his voice. They had no reinforcements coming, no backup to turn the tide. This was their moment, for better or worse. "Captain, you have to understand," Blake said, his tone softer now. "We're all out of options." Aria met his eyes. "I understand more than you know. But we're not giving up. Not here. Not now." A sharp explosion rocked the vehicle, knocking them both off balance. The command center was momentarily dark, and the hum of the monitors ceased. Aria's pulse spiked as a familiar wave of dread surged through her. "Status report," she snapped, gripping the sides of the chair to steady herself. Cass's voice came over the comms, a little too calm for the circumstances. "The Star have initiated a full-scale assault on the western perimeter, Captain. They've broken through." "Damn it," Aria muttered under her breath. She slammed her fist onto the console. Their defenses were cracking. It was only a matter of time before the enemy pushed deeper into the city. But then, something caught her eye, a small flicker on the screen. The Elysium was coming online. "Blake, I need those final coordinates." "Now," she ordered, urgency seeping into her voice. The human weapon, Elysium, had been Earth's final hope, the weapon that could potentially devastate the Star fleet. They had hidden it beneath the city for years, buried deep in the underground facilities. The countdown had already begun. It was time. Blake nodded sharply. "Coordinates locked, Captain. The countdown is set. It'll be ready in 30 minutes. "Good," Aria said, her voice tight. "We have 30 minutes to hold them off." The streets of New Chicago were a battleground. The last human resistance forces, equipped with the best Earth had to offer, were dug in like animals trying to hold on to their last scraps of land. Humans fought with everything they had left, determined, desperate, and unwilling to give up their planet without a fight. Aria felt the weight of every life at stake, and it spurred her on. She moved through the streets, surrounded by the remnants of her soldiers. Their eyes were grim, their faces covered in dirt and sweat, but there was a fire in them. They weren't ready to die, not like this, not without a chance to prove that Earth was worth saving. "Captain, we're being surrounded," Sergeant Lee called out as he moved past her. "The Star have deployed their shock troops." We're taking fire from all sides. Hold your ground. Aria barked, her voice cutting through the air. Stay together, keep fighting. Our backup's on the way. Behind her, human soldiers fired on the advancing Star Shock troops, their weapons sparking with energy, while overhead, fighter jets buzzed, strafing the alien forces. The Star retaliated immediately with a barrage of lasers and energy blasts that tore through the air and shattered the pavement beneath their feet. But Aria wasn't focused on the ground forces now. She couldn't afford to. The countdown clock was ticking, and Elysium was their last chance to win. If she could just hold long enough. Captain, the Star Commander is advancing toward the central square. Cass's voice came through again, sharp and urgent. Zar-Tal'ik has deployed personal guards, he's coming in person. Aria's stomach twisted. Zar-Tal'ik. The Star leader who had brought war to Earth's doorstep. He was coming for her. Deploy every last fighter, Aria ordered. We'll delay him until Elysium is ready. As the minutes dragged on, it became clear that humanity's fighters were being slowly overwhelmed. The Star weren't just invaders, they were predators, and they knew how to exploit every weakness. With each passing second, the fight became more desperate. Zar-Tal'ik finally arrived in the square, surrounded by an entourage of elite soldiers. His presence was like a dark cloud. He stepped down from his transport, his cold, reptilian eyes scanning the battlefield with cruel amusement. Captain Drake, he called out, his voice rich with malice. You are a fool. Do you really think your pathetic weapon can stop me? I have already won. Surrender now, and I will show mercy. Aria's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. Mercy? Is that what you call destruction, Zar-Tal'ik? You took everything from us, our cities, our homes, our families. You think you can break us? Zar-Tal'ik's laugh was hollow and cold. You misunderstand, Captain. I don't need to break you. You're already broken. Earth will be mine, and your people will serve the collective. It's inevitable. Aria took a step forward, her soldiers forming a protective line behind her. She didn't flinch. Then you don't understand us at all. Zar-Tal'ik's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, a loud, deafening roar sounded from beneath their feet. The ground trembled, and the sky above rippled with light. Elysium had activated. Aria's pulse quickened. She turned, not giving Zar-Tal'ik another look. This wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The air shimmered with unnatural energy. Aria stood at the center of the battlefield, her gaze locked on the swirling vortex of light where Elysium had just activated. Beneath her feet, the ground trembled, as though the earth itself were taking a final, desperate breath before the storm. The world around her was a war zone, shattered concrete, smoldering remains of buildings, and the wreckage of fighter jets painted the streets in the colors of devastation. And yet, despite it all, there was something almost serene about the stillness that followed the ignition of Elysium. For a single moment, the star forces seemed to falter, unsure of what was happening. The booming hum of Elysium echoed in the distance, its power rising as it charged to full strength. The weapon was their last, fragile hope. Zar-Tal'ik stood a few hundred meters away, watching the disruption in disbelief. His cold, reptilian eyes widened, and for the first time since this invasion began, he showed a crack in his otherwise impenetrable confidence. What have you done? Zar-Tal'ik's voice was a growl, edged with rage and confusion. Aria didn't flinch. This is the last mistake you'll ever make, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around her. The air was thick with tension, each second stretching into eternity. She didn't need to explain further. The Star were about to feel firsthand what it meant to provoke humanity. Behind her, Blake and the remaining human forces positioned themselves in defensive formations. Their eyes, though tired, still carried the burning resolve that had gotten them this far. This was not just a fight for survival. This was the fight for Earth's future. Their future. Aria turned toward her second-in-command. Blake, give the order. Activate the secondary grid. let's make sure this works. Blake hesitated for a moment, his brow furrowed with uncertainty. You're sure about this, Captain? Aria nodded, her face hardening. We don't have a choice. Blake signaled his team, and a low hum filled the air as the backup systems came online. The secondary grid would amplify the energy of Elysium and direct it with surgical precision. The star may have overwhelmed Earth with sheer force, but humanity was not about to lose in the face of such overwhelming odds. They would show the invaders the true meaning of defiance. As the hum grew louder, Zar-Tal'ik took a step forward. His towering figure seemed to absorb the light around him, an imposing silhouette against the distant glow of Elysium. He was no longer interested in negotiation. His eyes burned with rage, a deep, primal fury that threatened to explode. You think this weapon of yours will save you? Zar-Tal'ik spat, his tongue flicking out like a serpent's. Your planet will burn. You are nothing before us. Aria's gaze never wavered. We've already survived what you've thrown at us. And we'll survive you too. The star forces began to advance again, but their movements had changed. They were now more cautious, hesitant, sensing the rising tide of power emanating from the glowing epicenter of Elysium. The alien soldiers, who had once charged forward without fear, now faltered, looking toward their leader for direction. The ground beneath them began to pulse with energy, sending ripples through the terrain. For a moment, it seemed like everything had come to a standstill. The war was no longer defined by the star's brute force or Earth's desperation. It had shifted into something far more dangerous. A clash of ideologies. A clash of willpower. Zar-Tal'ik raised his hand, signaling for his forces to stop. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. He wasn't sure what Elysium was capable of. And neither was Aria, but she knew they had no time to waste. Prepare to fire, Aria barked, her voice cutting through the silence. The final countdown had begun. Her fingers hovered over the controls, and the full force of Elysium was now at her command. Blake's voice came through the comms, sharp and steady. Captain, we're locked on target. Ready when you are. Aria's hand hovered over the activation button. The air felt thick with electricity, and the weight of the moment pressed down on her. She was about to unleash the most powerful weapon humanity had ever created. It could change everything. But in the end, it was their only chance. Zar-Tal'ik sneered. You are weak, Aria. You think your pathetic weapon will scare me? I've seen worlds burn before. He extended his arm, and his own forces took up a defensive position around him. We are the future of this galaxy. You are nothing. His words rang hollow, and Aria could almost hear the desperation beneath them. He knew it, deep down. Earth was not the primitive world it once had been. Humanity had evolved, and it was no longer the target of invaders, it was the force that would strike back. Her eyes locked onto Zar-Tal'ik's, and she pressed the button. A deafening roar erupted from the ground as Elysium unleashed its full power. The earth trembled beneath them as energy erupted from the core of the weapon, a blinding pulse that raced through the air, lighting the sky in an unearthly glow. The pulse hit the star forces like a wave crashing against the shore, sending them flying backward, their bodies disintegrating in the intense energy burst. The energy wave did not stop there. It surged toward Zar-Tal'ik, and as it hit him, a shock wave rippled through the space around them. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Zar-Tal'ik's towering form began to flicker, his body shimmering like a mirage as Elysium's energy tore into him. Zar-Tal'ik opened his mouth in a final, futile roar. Then, with a crackling sound, his body disintegrated into the raw power of the weapon, vanishing before Aria's eyes. The Star Leader was no more. The battlefield fell silent. For a moment, there was only the faint hum of Elysium powering down and the distant echoes of the battle that had raged across New Chicago. The remaining star forces hesitated, unsure of their next move. Blake, status report, Aria said, her voice still steady but her breath coming in shallow bursts. Blake's voice crackled through the comms, tinged with disbelief. It's over, Captain. The Star are retreating. We've won. Aria closed her eyes for a brief moment, allowing the weight of what they had just accomplished to wash over her. They had done it. Earth had survived. But as she looked out at the ravaged city around her, she knew this was not the end. The scars of the war would remain, but humanity had proven one undeniable truth: they were not just survivors. They were fighters. And the Star had learned that lesson the hard way.